Hello everybody and welcome to Aurora 4X. I of course am Sir Beardian, and today we are restarting my long time created tutorial for Aurora 4X. Now, it has been about 2.5 years since I did my original guide, and been some pretty significant progress, not so much in the game itself, God no, but the amount of crazy stuff that people have discovered, not only myself but others in the subreddit, in the Discord, and in general, everybody involved in the community. So I'm redoing this with significantly better equipment and also significantly improved knowledge and experience. So let us begin. Now, when you first start the game, you're not going to see this. You're going to see this. If you delete your last game, this will pop up automatically, but generally you start off with this. What you want to do now, the game starts with is Steve's, who is the creator of Aurora, test game. So you're welcome to delete that, but you're also welcome to select it, load it, play it, see it, play it, do whatever you want. But ultimately, you are going to want to start a new game. So either delete the last game or click new, and you will get this window. Now, I've made some minor little adjustments because it always takes me forever to come up with things. So this is the game creation window. So I'm going to go through it one by one. Game name. This is purely for your own management. It appears here and allows you to differentiate which game is what. You ideally want it to be descriptive enough that you know which game is which. It starts off as new game name, so if you have 5 games with that particular name, you're going to have a hard time picking out which one's which. So make sure you name it something reasonable. Next, we have the Space Master password. This is the password you want to set if you want to lock a game from being able to use Space Master easily. If you want a community game and you want to make sure nobody can cheat, this is what you want to set. If you want to be able to give your game to other people, not even as a community game, this is what you want to set. If you're playing just for yourself, this is generally best to leave blank, because if you forget your SM password and you make a mistake and you need to fix it, you're not going to be able to do it. So best to leave it blank unless it's meant to be a community game that you want to make sure that nobody can cheat with. Alright, moving on. Basic parameters. Starting year starts off at 2025. By official canon, this is the year that humanity has discovered the technology for transnewtonian materials, which are the materials that the game revolves around, the economy of the game revolves around. So this is, well, it's the starting year. It also can be basically anything you want. It is entirely up to you. It's entirely subjective, and it has no real impact on the gameplay. So you can make it year 1, or you can make it year 1 million. Is that a million? That's a million. But if you make it a weird year, it can be a little bit difficult to keep track, because a lot of people will say, oh, I'm X amount of years in. So making a starting year 1 will help track that. Leaving it 2025 will also help track that, because you know that's the starting year. If you make a different starting year, you might lose track. So it could be a little bit difficult to figure out how much time you're into a game. I'm going to go with starting year 1. Number of systems, default is 1000. This is the maximum number of systems that Aurora can generate. Now, this is the maximum number of unique systems that Aurora can possibly generate. And I'll go through the system generation, how it works later on, but this is the maximum. If you leave it at 1000 and you don't have a very fast computer, you're game and computer are probably going to die before you get there. It also can make it extremely difficult to find anyone if you start off with an NPR, because if you're on one end of the galaxy and they're on the other one, then you're going to have a potentially hard time running into one another. However, with the way that Aurora generates systems, you could end up next door, so it doesn't have any specific impact except that it makes it less likely that you will run into empires. I'm going to go with 150 because we don't want to make it too big. Difficulty modifier, so as the pop-up says, it's essentially a multiplier on NPR populations, research rates, and growth rates. NPR, of course, stands for non-player race, and it is every other race that is not you, a race that you created and control, or one of the spoiler empires. Obviously, you decrease it to make it easier, and you increase it to make it harder. Now, this only affects their spawning numbers, so it does not affect how fast they research once they have spawned. So, depending on how good of a player you are, you might want to raise that or increase it. Race generation chance. If you have a starting NPR, you ideally want this to be very, very, very low, because if an NPR spawns an NPR and they get into a fight, and you are not nearby and are able to blow one of them out of the water, you are basically going to kill your game, because the game will pause and slow down for them to have their fight, and if you're not involved in that, then you're not going to be able to influence that, and it's very, very easy for them to get stuck on each other. So ideally, you want to have this nice and low. I'm going to set it for 5. Player generation chance. This will depend on how many NPRs you want to run into. If you want to have lots and lots of empires all over the place, and you want to be closed in, and you want to have a big old brawl, you want to set this high. If you want to be able to explore easily without running into many people, you want to set it low. I'm going to leave it at 30%. Now, one thing in mind, this is not a 30% chance to find an NPR when you generate the system. This check will only trigger if a suitable planet is created by the system generator. So this 30% is significantly less than 30% as a final number. So keep that in mind. Constructions, and you can see the specific requirements. So no ruins, oxygen atmosphere, and gravity within limits. Construction time, you want to leave this at 400,000 because this is around 5 days. The game is geared around this. Now, it will automatically adjust the production cycle, so you won't get 5. So if you have this, you won't get 5 days worth of production out of 2.5 days. We'll only get 2.5 days production out of 2.5 days. However, if you mess with things, it can impact performance, because some things are only calculated on the construction cycle, which means that if you make it more frequent, yeah, you'll have less downtime between things like ships being built, buildings being built, labs being built, stuff like that. But you're going to have the system be calculating these things a lot more frequently. If you make it larger than that, you're going to have a potential problem where your ship, even though it's only 1 day away from being built, won't actually appear for a month. If you have an alien on your doorstep or in your system, that month could make a huge difference. So I strongly recommend you leave it at the default, and that is what I will be doing. Minimum combat per system, as it says on the box, minimum number of comets. So there you go. Comets are nice in that they're asteroids, but they also move around the system, so they can be easy to catch sometimes, or they might not. So up to you whether you want to set minimum. It is still possible for comets to generate, even if with it is a 0. It is just the minimum. Not sure why I can't change this in this game. Should be able to change it. I'll come back to that. Oh, because I'm using real world. Okay. This is related to how the galaxy is generated. This is a very important stat. Well, these are very, very important settings. I will... Okay, yeah, let's focus on. So, the way Aurora generates systems, right, with 150, it will give a number between 1 and 150 to every star system, right? Let's say you generate Sol and it gets a number of 70. Okay, so Sol is 70. When you jump to a new system, it can't be Sol, so it can't be 70. So what it does is it checks this chance. If, so 50%. So that means it's the 50% chance for that system to be generated as a local system. Now, if it's generated as a non-local system, then it will take any one of the numbers available to it that is not already taken by another system. Actually, no, that's not true. Any number that is not itself. So basically, any number except 70 can be taken if it's a non-local system. And the system that you generate will be given that number. Let's say 72. No, let's say 140. Okay, so non-local gets 140. If a jump point in that 140 system then gets, say, 60, and then that system gets 70, you will basically have a 3-system loop. So if it generates a system that already has a number, then it will link that jump point to the system that number belongs to. Otherwise, it will generate a brand new system and give it that new number. If you do get a local system, then the number of the new system will be within this range of the system it is jumping out of. So instead of having the entire 150 to pick from Earth 70, it will only pick between 55 and 95. All right. So if you have this very high and this very low, it is going to be extremely easy to create tiny little pockets that you cannot escape from, because these systems will all link amongst each other. If you set this very low, then you're going to have very large, sprawled galaxies where the systems are very unlikely to be linked to systems nearby them. So you're going to have very long chains. So this has a very large impact on what your galaxy looks like. 50 and 15 are reasonable. So there's a 50% chance that it's going to be a local cluster, and the cluster size is relatively large, especially compared to 150. So I'm going to leave it at that. But that is how that works, and it's not really intuitive, but something to keep track of. Okay, so starting parameters. Once again, these are entirely decorative. They have no real impact whatsoever on gameplay. Government type has a very minor impact. I'll talk about it in a second. Theme picks your system names, automatically generated system names, automatically generated ship names. It has a couple of different automatically pulled lists, and you can see here that there's quite a lot of them. We are going with the theme of Australia, where far in the future, the wildlife of Australia has spread throughout the world, and all life has died except for Australia, and Australia has spread across the planet. So planet is now being renamed to Australia 2.0. Command theme is going to be English, because I don't want to be pronouncing weird names. This is another toggle that is extremely vital. Transnewtonian Empire will give you more shipyards, starting tech points, and it will give you Transnewtonian tech and a couple of other technologies that are essentially starting techs for advanced technologies. Conventional will give you less shipyards, no starting tech points, and you have the option for missile bases, which are basically PDCs, that basically nuclear silos. It will also give you no a technology, and you will have to research Transnewtonian technology yourself, as well as all the basics. I have discovered a kind of mid-level start. The other thing with conventional, my biggest issue with conventional is that with a conventional start, you're basically just spending 5 to 10 years or even 20 if you get a crap scientist role, you're going to be spending a couple of years essentially just getting Trans-Utonian tech. So what I found but with a Trans-Utonian empire, you lose a lot of that initial early development of your empire. So what I found is conventional, but then give yourself the Trans-Utonian technology. Best of both worlds. And that is what we're going to be doing, and I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to start off, but we have to start with conventional. So we'll do that. Species tolerance. Oh, government type. I did say come back to that. If you have a look, see how research facilities changes? These settings change two things. First of all, it changes your facilities, so what you start with, and also what building the configuration of the starting buildings when Trans-Utonian. It will also change up some species statistics. The most important one being xenophobia, which is how difficult it is to raise relations with other races. Player race is the default, but otherwise you can pick any one of these, and there's a whole heap there. Species tolerance. This is standard for humans. So you start off with a maximum atmospheric pressure of 4. So any planet with more than 4 atmospheres you cannot live on. Maximum deviation in temperature of 24 degrees. Maximum deviation oxygen pressure by 50%. And maximum deviation gravity of 90%. And there are default settings that this is based off, and I'll show you once we actually get into the game. Having this smaller makes it more difficult to colonize planets. Having these bigger, so this one, and this one all make it smaller, all make it more difficult to colonize. Larger make it less difficult to colonize. This one, smaller, makes it more difficult to colonize. Larger makes it, well, actually, yeah, larger makes it easy to colonize. So yeah, having any of these, it's a decreasing. So smaller makes it difficult. Larger makes it less difficult. Starting population. This is the default starting population that the game is geared and balanced around. Raising this makes the game easier in some places, more difficult in others. The most important thing that this has an impact on is starting NPR, what they start off with, and how many minerals you start off with on your homeworld. So if you raise this, you start off with more minerals on Earth. If you leave it as is, you start off with the default amount. NPRs will also be more powerful and spawn with a larger base, even with this at 100%. So if you're not familiar with what you're doing in Aurora, leave it at 500. If you raise it, the NPRs will be significantly stronger, and they will stomp your face, because when you're new, your ships are not going to be good. Unfortunate. It's the truth. Even my ships were absolute trash when I started. So if you're not familiar with Aurora, leave it at 500. Manufacturing sector, this is what you end up having. So you get 100 million people to work in your actual buildings. I'll talk about where this number comes from once we actually get into the game. Wealth creation rate and industrial percentage. These are flat bonus rates to your wealth creation and your industry. If you're new and you have trouble with keeping these values at a reasonable rate, or above 0 for wealth, you can raise these up. If you want to challenge, you can reduce these down. Starting shipyards and starting labs. Starting shipyards is not necessarily a problem, because shipyards are relatively easy to build up, especially before you start spawning enemies. Research labs, they're expensive and they take a lot of industry to build. So you ideally want to have as many as possible, but once again, it's up to you how many you want to start off with. If you start off with very few on a conventional, which it will do, you're going to have a hard time actually getting your technologies up. No missile bases for conventional start. If you start off conventional, you start off with a couple of missile silos. You can turn these off. They used to be horribly, horribly broken. Apparently they're less broken now, so it's up to you whether you want to keep them or not. I will be turning them off for the time being, because I want to start fresh. Whew. Moving on. Starting system. Jump points. You can leave. It's defaults to 4, I believe, but you can raise it as high as or low as you want. 0 randomizes it. These are guaranteed jump points out of Sol. If you leave it very small, it is very easy to defend the system, but it's very easy to get stuck in the system. If you make it very high, it's going to be harder to defend because you have a lot more entry points, but at the same time, you're going to have a lot of exit points. Up to you what you use. We're going to leave it as default. System body and jump point survey complete. It just makes it so you can skip surveying Sol yourself. We're going to leave these as unticked. You can still give yourself tech points even with a conventional start. So don't forget that. You can set it. These, whether you use them or not, if you need to use SM mode to use these. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what's in here. However, if you use assigning tech points automatically, then you want to use this. If you don't use automatic, then what's in here is completely irrelevant. If you use auto tech points or allocation at game start, you can also have it create ship systems and ship designs. Now, it uses about the same algorithm that the NPRs and certain spoilers use, so it gives you a rough idea of how to design a basic ship that can not run out of gas instantly and not die the second it walks into an enemy. So you're welcome to use these. Personally, I won't, but that is something that you can do if you want to get an idea of what ships look like. Personally, if I wanted an idea of what ships look like, I would just start the game that the game starts with, start Steve's games, have a look at the ships that he's created. They're going to be a lot more intelligent than what the auto designer does. Okay. Next, starting race, either Sol or custom system. I strongly recommend, if you don't know what you're doing, to not use custom empire, because you have to literally create your starting system and empire and everything else almost from scratch. It takes a long time. It's a fair bit of hard work. If you don't know what you're doing, you're probably going to break something. Stick with Sol to start with. Once you know how the game works and you're familiar with it and you're familiar with SM and potentially designer mode, feel free to set this up yourself. Spoilers. Now, they're non-NPR computer opponents. They don't work the same way that NPRs and players do. So they're not, and it tells you exactly what they are almost. They're not exactly spoilers, but because of how they specifically function, that's what the community calls them. I'm going to leave the precursors and the Star Swarm in. I'm going to leave the invaders off because they are annoying bastards. We might turn them on later on, and you can turn them off mid-game, but we're going to leave them off for the time being. If you're familiar with my last series, on episode 8, the invaders spawned, one of their ships blew me to pieces, and we had to scrub them around episode 9. So we're going to leave them off to avoid that. NPRs. This tick box only matters if this is above 0. This tick box tells the game to generate NPRs, and it tells it to generate this many NPRs. We're going to generate 0 because we are going to be taking it slow, relatively. We're going to be taking it easy, and we're not going to be rushing. We also do not want the NPRs to be popping other NPRs or running into us early on, so we're going to have them entirely be based on our exploration. So this is going to be 0. Generate empires NPR. Any new races generated during system generation will be computer controlled. So this, if you untick this and you leave this above 0, then it will generate non-NPR player races. This is advanced stuff. If you're leaving this above 0, you want to leave this ticked. If you untick it, it will generate player controlled empires. It's awkward. Leave it ticked. This one, NPRs activate non-NPR computer opponents. So this will allow NPRs to spawn these guys and run into them. So, once again, it only matters if this is above 0. No, it kind of does and doesn't, because because as soon as an NPR is spawned and it starts exploring, it's going to have the potential to trigger these things. Turning this on lets the spoilers trim down and interfere with the NPRs, but at the same time, it makes it more likely that an NPR is going to potentially get into combat, slowing down your game. For now, I'm going to turn it off. And generate only non-challenging Newtonian races. If you tick this, an NPR will always spawn as a conventional empire. Unticked means that it will usually, if you leave it unticked, they're usually going to spawn Trans-Newtonian, which means they're going to have decent ships, they're going to have decent weapons, they're going to be much tougher to crack. I'm going to leave this off. No overhaul. Okay, now we're getting to the meat of things, as if we weren't already. 25 minutes in. Hey, go figure. All right. This is one of the most important checkboxes on the right side of the screen. No overhauls. All military ships require maintenance and overhauls. They have a maintenance clock. I'm going to go into a hell of a lot more detail when I discuss maintenance in a further episode. But if you have maintenance on and you do not keep track of your maintenance, your ships will literally fall apart out from under you. They will break, they will fall apart, they will die, and they will do it without even seeing an enemy. So, if you don't want to play with maintenance, and you just want to dick around with ships and do whatever the hell you want, and not have to worry about a huge aspect of logistics, turn overhauls off. I'm going to leave it on because I want to talk about overhauls and maintenance and all of that, and I want to show you how that works. Because if I didn't, this series, I'll be cutting a huge chunk out of the game. I'm going to leave it off, but that is something you can do. If you're running a game where you're just gonna have like a tournament game or something like that, you can leave it off because ideally you don't want to break down to be destroying components in the middle of a tournament. But just for solo play, I do recommend you leave it off. But that is something that you can do. Jump gates and jump points. Turning this off essentially completely makes jump point technology worthless. Also, jump gate building technology worthless. It essentially allows all ships to traverse all jump points at a whim, and it completely removes jump shock. I'm going to talk about those things once we build our first jump ship, but that is where you turn it off. You can still find jump gates on jump points even with this off, so don't freak out. And of course, NPRs and spoilers can potentially build them, but I'm going to leave this off so that we do talk about jump drives. All right, commander aspects. Realistic commander promotions. This will tell Aurora to automatically promote your commanders. Now, you initially start off with about 50-60 commanders, and later on, as the game progresses and your empire gets bigger, you're going to get a lot more. We're talking potentially hundreds. Promoting each and every one of these guys and girls is going to eventually become micro hell. You can turn this off or leave it on. Well, you can turn it off if you want to do it yourself, but you can also leave it on if you want to let Aurora to do it for you based on the promotion grade. One thing to note is that if you tell Aurora to do it, you can't promote yourself directly, because Aurora is just going to promote them itself automatically anyway. So if you leave this on, the only way to force a promotion on a commander is to give them a medal, or a demotion, is to give them a medal with an appropriate score that will give them that promotion when Aurora automatically promotes them. So just keep in mind that leaving this on, it will remove a lot of micro, but it will take a little bit of agency away from you in a direct manner. Commander political bonuses. If we didn't have this in real life, a lot of political leaders today would not be political leaders. So essentially what it means is people who get promotions through schmoozing and nepotism. And is it nepotism? Nepotism, thank you. It's people who schmooze their way up the ranking ladder, not because they are good at what they do. So what this essentially does is it gives a political bonus rating to a commander that can go up just like any other skill bonus, except it provides no other actual function. So it provides no bonus or detriment to an officer except for the fact that they have a political bonus instead of a skill bonus. Moving on, Inexperienced Fleets. This is mostly going to matter in combat. If you want your ships to react to all your orders instantly at the drop of a hat, no matter what, you turn this off. If you want to have the realistic action where fleets get confused and have to organize themselves to make turns and respond to orders, you want to leave this on. I'm going to leave this on because I want to show you how it works. Real Star Systems, this pulls stars' names out of a specific pre-generated box instead of generating them on the fly off your theme, and it will essentially try and replicate these systems as we are familiar with them in real life. If you want to play in the Milky Way galaxy with Earth, you use this. If you want to play in some fantasy galaxy that's completely randomly generated, you'd want to leave that off. One thing to keep in mind is that planet generation is still random. So this only affects the stars. It does not affect planets. It will generate black holes if a star is actually a black hole. It will not generate nebulas. If you have real world turned on, you will never find a nebula. So if you want to play with nebulas, make sure that you leave this off. If you want to use anything other than the default generation chance, you leave this off. Okay, almost there. Final stretch. Orbital motion. Orbital motion of planets and moons and asteroids. These do the exact same things but for different things. They allow planetary bodies to orbit around their star on the production cycle based on their orbital speed. It does provide some tactical and strategic aspects in the sense that a asteroid that is right next to a jump point or planet that is right next to a jump point that is not orbiting will stay there and can provide as a suitable permanent defensive fixture. A planet or asteroid that orbits around the star and only passes by that jump point once every 300 years is not going to be suitable for a permanent defensive fixture. So, the other thing to keep in mind is that while planets and moons are interesting, fun, and tolerable, you will end up with thousands and thousands of asteroids. Sol itself has about 160 off the top of my head, but it has a lot. And almost every star system you run into is going to have a couple dozen asteroids. If you have orbital motion for every single one of them, you're going to bog down your game. If your system isn't fast, you're going to bog down your game and it's going to die. So, orbital motion for asteroid, I recommend you turn off. Orbital motion for planets and moons, you can leave on. Last thing, same system truce. Unless you start with an NPR in the same system as yourself or an NPR, this is completely irrelevant. So this will prevent an NPR from declaring war on any other empire race that shares the same system as their capital. So if you spawn a system that has multiple NPRs on the same planet, this will force them to not necessarily work together, but at least not fight instantly for the first 10 years. If you leave this as 0, then the second you generate a system that has multiple NPRs, they're probably going to start a war with each other. And unless you're in a position to kill them all, you're going to have a bad time and your game's probably going to die.
You're going to have a bad time.
Thank you. So, that covers creating a new game. Now, I have skimmed over a few sections, so hopefully I haven't forgotten to come back to anything, but essentially those are the factors you're going to have to keep in mind. Now, Throughout this series, I'm going to go into a lot more detail about a lot of the stuff that comes out of this, such as racial tolerances, overhauls, jump gates, all of that stuff. So if you're not really, if you want more information, either wait until I finish recording or skip ahead to the sections that cover those. But yeah, otherwise, feel free to just jump in and do whatever you want to do. So that is it for episode 0, I guess. I'm going to hit create game. You first get an initial pop-up for race generation. This is going to take a little bit longer if you're actually generating NPRs. But essentially, it's going to create all the other species now. So the spoiler races and any NPRs that you generate. The more NPRs you generate, the longer this is going to take. But it shouldn't take too long. And then eventually, you're going to get dropped back into your game screen. Shouldn't take more than a moment. Takes about a minute and a half on my system to generate these of a flat database. While we're waiting for it, there we go. Game setup, please press select. Here we are. Quick summary. So I'm going to discuss more in detail about this one once we act on at the beginning of the next episode, I think. No, it's fine. The only thing, this is just a summary of what we saw before, but you do get 2 more. The first one is detection is normal. You want to start off with normal in all systems. Not sure why it's repeating that. You want normal in all systems, but you also have none without player presence and automatic without player presence. This is for NPRs who are trying to detect one another but failing. You can make them force to detect them, which helps a little bit with NPRs detecting each other and can help with slowdown. Disasters is sun warming and cooling by percentage per year, which is going to force you out of Sol real fast. So if you want a rush game, that is what you want. But essentially, normal and no disaster is what you want as your first game. So that's it. Next episode, we're going to start, and I'll go through the UI of the actual game itself. But for now, I will see you in the next episode.
So this has basically just been a podcast.
Yeah.